May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. On this first Sunday of Lent, we imagine following Jesus into the wilderness, where he stayed for 40 days and 40 nights and was tempted by the devil. And Jesus passes the tests, surprise, surprise, where he was tempted, and he goes back into his ministry with new proof and power, confirming that he is the Son of God. After this 40-day symbolic period of going into the wilderness of Jesus, of Lent, after that comes Holy Week, the pinnacle of Jesus' ministry, where he goes into Jerusalem and confronts the evils of the world directly, resulting in his state-sanctioned execution, which we observe on Good Friday, and then his God-inspired resurrection, which we observe on Easter. His time in the wilderness allowed Jesus to choose actively to deny worldly power, which would lead him to earthly death, but eternal life. Jesus falls into a line of prophets and patriarchs within the 40-day formula. You may recall other 40-day periods in the Bible. Noah and his family and all the creatures he could save from mass flooding and destruction were on the ark for 40 days and 40 nights. Moses ascends upon Mount Sinai, awaiting words from God that become the 10 Commandments for 40 days and 40 nights. The prophet Elijah fasted in the desert, awaiting a new commission from God for 40 days and 40 nights. And the Israelites were in exile for 40 years in Exodus before they reached their promised land. Now Christians all throughout the world, including us, enter into a 40-day period of Lent, where we have an opportunity to listen for the movement of God in our lives. We are following Jesus into the wilderness, and just a note about humility, when we follow Jesus anywhere, we are going to fall short. And we should learn to have tremendous grace for ourselves and for each other as we go into this season together. What a relief it is, actually, to remember that we aren't Jesus and that we are going to fail the tests of temptation. What are our tests of temptation? Take a moment to think about it, just like I asked the kids to think about it. And some of the things that I tested the kids about really actually have echoes in adult life, wanting to get through hard things quickly so we can get to the pleasurable, easy, light stuff. What are our temptations? The temptation in both of the texts we have today ultimately are temptations about power, about being God. Do any of us do a version of this in our own lives? The serpent promises that Eve and Adam will become like gods, the ones who know good and evil. I told the visioning team, who's doing beautiful work right now, by the way, I told them that I could only be with them about half of the time, so I would not be tempted to control the process, to bend it to my will, to make the vision of First Church Julia's vision. And this visioning team has weeks, even months of congregational feedback and is actively discerning how to articulate the vision of our church. On our first meeting, each of the ones on the visioning team went around and told their individual visions for the church so that we could each be clear about what we want to see without making the whole process curve to our personal plans. Because if we are indeed inviting God into the mix, and I believe that if you are here today, you are someone who in some way invites God into the mix, we are inviting an element of the unknown. What are the temptations that you live with? How do you feel tempted to stray from God? Are you aware of the outside forces that work on us without us even knowing it and pull us from God's mission of love on our own lives? How often do we pause to pay attention to the things from the outside world that we internalize that are not of God? Today, during the second hour, we will discuss the topic of mindfulness and meditation. How often do we just sit with our minds and ourselves in silence? This is a rare practice these days because of all the noise in the world. Sometimes I confess I don't like to even eat alone in silence. I like to have the TV on or music on in the background. It's hard for me to be still. It resists the overscheduled go, go, go pace of the world, and even harder, it makes us sit with ourselves, allowing space for things to come up that we might push away otherwise. Thich Nhat Hanh, a Zen Buddhist monk who's quoted in your bulletin today, he's a scholar, a poet, and even a political figure from Vietnam who urged for peace, that peace is possible in every step, in every moment. He's famous for saying that mindfulness can happen even during the most mundane tasks, like washing the dishes. That can be a type of prayer or meditation in and of itself. That every moment is an opportunity to be at peace in the present moment. On Ash Wednesday last week, as I imposed ashes on foreheads, the refrain was, "Remember that you are dust, and to dust you shall return. Walk in God's love." During Lent, we begin by remembering our mortality and remembering to focus on what is important in the face of life and death. And we are so tempted to stray from what is really important. We are so delicately balanced between life and death. We are in the face of life and death all the time, and in response we are called to walk in God's love, but we don't always. We stray. And during Lent, we are asked to be honest about the ways we have strayed, so that we can return to God. Mindfulness is a type of prayer that we can use to simply pay attention to our habits of mind. Centering prayer is the Christian version of this. It is an ancient mystical practice that just basically allows for silence. We can notice when we start scolding ourselves or putting ourselves down to return to God's love, to return to the present moment. We can notice when we start judging others or becoming impatient with ourselves and the world, to return to God's love and to return to the present moment. Mindfulness and meditation are about encountering the truth of our lives. Can we tell the truth in prayer? Anne Lamott, the author I quoted with the children, she says, "My belief is that when you're telling the truth, you're close to God. And if you say, 'God, I am exhausted and depressed beyond words, and I don't like you at all right now, and I recoil from most people who believe in you,' that might be the most honest thing you've ever said. And if you told me that you had said to God, 'It's all hopeless and I don't have a clue if you exist, but I could use a hand,' she says, it would almost bring tears to my eyes. Tears of pride in you for the courage it takes to get real, really real. She says, it would make me want to sit next to you at the dinner table." So prayer is our sometimes real selves trying to communicate with the real, with truth, with light. It is us reaching out to be heard, hoping to be found by a light and warmth in the world, instead of a darkness and a cold. Meditation and mindfulness and silence are a type of prayer. And not everybody loves meditation and silent prayer. It's not for everybody. And for those who do take on this practice, you know that a lot comes up in the silence. It's actually not supposed to be an enjoyable practice. That's not why we do it, but it can be. Jesus went into the wilderness for 40 days not because it was an enjoyable practice, but because the Holy Spirit led him there to cleanse his spirit and to test him. So we ask ourselves again, what are we tempted by? What are we tested by? We Christians are often tempted by the idea that we are right, that just because we welcome vulnerable people, we have God on our side. We must repent from the idealized images of ourselves to a realistic image of being God's children who happen to screw up a lot. And luckily, the meditations, the practices of meditation and mindfulness can help us return to the present moment. We may be tempted to view Lent as a season of self-betterment, because unfortunately, the world of advertisements conflate being spiritual with being happy and wealthy and maybe even thin. None of these things does Jesus promise when we follow him. Lent is indeed instead about a season where we fast from the stories told to us in the world about who we should be. And when we fast from the things that hold us back from God, then we return to the understanding of ourselves as beloved and as part of a bigger project that we might not have planned. Fasting from the false stories of our worth in the world are so important during Lent because we live in a culture of more, of excess, of overconsumption, and of never enough. We are told to want bigger homes and nicer cars and better schools. We are tempted all the time by a consumer culture that entices us to overbuy, to overschedule, to overeat, to overconsume. And 40% of food in America is wasted. We have both a poverty and an obesity epidemic, and they often go hand in hand because very poor people and places often do not have access to healthy foods. It is also, to complicate it more, National Eating Disorder Awareness Week. So we must be careful about the language of fasting, that it is not helpful for some of us, and some really do need more. But all of us need to be reminded that we are enough and beloved in the eyes of God. Underlying our consumer culture is a myth of never enough about ourselves, that we are fed by ads and billboards and commercials, and we internalize these feelings of being never enough. And the myth tells us that if we buy more, consume more, or cleanse ourselves, or get rid of things that we don't need, it will somehow fill the emptiness inside ourselves. But beloved of God, only God can do that. When we fill ourselves with the idea that we are enough as we are, that is what Jesus is doing when he is going into the wilderness for 40 days. And that is how we should follow him. When we try to fill an emptiness, sometimes it's trying to exert some control over our lives, which do feel so out of control. And sometimes, because it is in our cultural DNA, we get lulled into comfort by buying things. And retail therapy is very real in this culture. Can I confess a story to you? Yesterday I went to Target with Kira, and I didn't need anything. And you know how this story goes. I walked out with a wooden basket for organizing my kitchen, with goggles for swimming. I don't swim. I don't even swim. I want to swim. I don't have access to a pool, though. I also got So gross. I got Girl Scout flavored gum, which was disgusting. A pack of Kiwis and a pack of Hanes t-shirts. And in a real nod to self-control, I put down the mini basketball hoop that you hang on a door and you can just put that down. I put down the Bose speakers and the wood-scented candle. Real self-control there. But listen to this irony. I walked out with the New York Times bestseller book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. After getting all this clutter that I didn't need. As we approach this table, let us notice and confess the things of our culture that we internalize, the stories and the myths that we tell ourselves about not being enough, that hold us back from God. Then let us remember to cloak ourselves in God's love, and remember that we are loved just as we are, and that what comes up in the silence, if we dare to practice, is also loved. God invites us to return again and again and to know ourselves as beloved, and to reach out to God and to the truth of our lives in all moments as we follow Jesus. Let us remember to pray. Amen.